Okay, welcome back to part 2. This is our review of a Powermatic 1800B bandsaw. And in part 2, I want to cover a few things, in particular the fence system. Now there's a lot of different kind of fences on the market. What makes the Powermatic stand out? Number one is its adjustable capabilities. Another thing I want to talk about is blade control. In particular, talking about the safety system of the blade, the foot brake, the micro switch, things like that. I want to be able to show you how I brought the saw into the shop. There's a number of ways to have the saw delivered to you. I chose one that was a little different than the standard way it's being done, and I wanted to walk you through the system that we used. And that would pretty well cover it, with the exception of the mobile base. The mobile base is a Bora Portamate, and I wanted to show that to you and make it clear how it worked and the opportunities it offered. But then we'd just do a wrap up and we'll talk about the company that I did buy the saw from, and I hope that will suffice and answer all your questions, and I hope we've given you the opportunity to see how everything works. So hang in there, here comes part 2. Thanks so much. Okay, how about we take some time and talk about the fence system. You know, a lot of bandsaws have great looking fences. They seem like they should work quite well. But frankly, there are many variations of the same thing. Now the Powermatic system, they've kind of brought over from their table saw. You have the pause lock system for locking the fence down. Others just screw down, clamp down, different types of things. The aluminum extruded fence is very heavy, and it also comes with a resaw guidepost. So let me take a minute and reposition and show you a few of these things in a little more detail. So when we take a look at the fence, obviously now I'm showing it to you in the second position. Moves quite easily. Now this is the ripping position. One way to describe it, of course. Another is to point out the advantage you have with the amount of room you have for your hands. My Laguna tool saw was only 3 inches tall, so it gave me a lot more room. Now when this fence is in the up position, it's a resaw fence by definition, but it offers you quite a number of opportunities. For example, if you were feeding in a longboard, or in my case a larger log, and I wanted this secure area to be forward of the blade, obviously just like a table saw, you pull it forward. And if I need a little more room off the back end, I can do that as well. Now the last thing to point out, let me tighten it up here, is the fact that, like your table saw, it has the recess underneath for the sawdust to go so it doesn't collect. I mentioned the fence is completely adjustable, so we can make sure that it is square to the table, square to the miter slot, and that's all easily done. Also, the saw does come with the resaw guide pin. This thing weighs 4 or 5 pounds easily, and it attaches without this fence on. There's a clip for it right here, as well as a large thumb screw to hold it in place, and that system works extremely well. Alright, that pretty well covers it for the fence. Let's take a few moments and take a look at the Portamate mobile base. Okay, we'll be right back. Well, let's take a look now at a Portamate PM3500 large mobile base unit. Now this unit in itself weighs about 41 pounds. Once you put the extension rails on it to get it up to size for this saw, I think that brings it up pretty darn close to 50 pounds. So this does add to the weight of the whole show, of course. So let's take a moment and get around this thing, and I'll show you how it works. Hang on. Well, the PM3500 sets itself apart as it only has the 2 flip stops on the back. Now to put the saw down on the floor, all you do is lock the 2 flip stops down, and it drops the feet to the floor, and the saw then becomes very stable. Now there is another model of the same base, the 3550, and the difference is it has 4 turning wheels, 4 flip stops, and that would be if you had a very tight shop and you needed to be able to slide it in sideways to the wall or an area pretty small to turn it around. One of the disadvantages of that is that if you did bump it against a piece of something on the floor or hit a big crack, something like that, it could be considered top heavy. Now while shopping for this, I had called both Powermatic and Portamate to be certain that this base was safe for this saw. Both of them cautiously answered that the saw could be top heavy for those reasons I just meant, hitting a crack in the floor or running over something left on the floor and being pushed at a wrong angle. It could be top heavy. I haven't experienced that at all. Now for me, as you can see, I do have the sprawling on the floor right in here, and I can tell you if I don't set the saw down on one side or the other of the sprawling, I will end up getting the saw to be shaky or vibration. So I'll always set it down on a solid smooth piece of concrete. Now it moves quite easily. I'm moving it with just one hand. As you can see, it's pretty darn nice. Now the other thing to remark to you about is getting it set up before you get the saw delivered so that when you're ready, you can drop it right into the mobile base. Now, mine was set up for me ahead of time, and what I ran into at that moment to put it on the mobile base, it wouldn't fit. I needed about another 1/8 of an inch. So the inside, where it's going to drop from here to here, needs to be 22.5 by 32.5 on the long side for it to fit. Now the other thing I ran into is if you drop it directly into the base without plywood supports on the 4 corners, it drops in too deep and you cannot open the door. The door would hit the mobile base, so be aware of that. You do need to have that 3/4 inch piece of plywood in there. So they advertise that it only adds 1 inch of height to the saw. Real world is it adds 1 3/4 inches because you need to put the plywood in there to be able to get that lower door open. But as you saw, it rolls very, very easily. I mean, I'm pushing it with one hand right now and pulling it back with one hand. So I find that to be a very, very well-made product. So investment in it between the base and the extension rails was pretty close to $200. So we have to tack that on to the cost of the whole saw. All right, what do you say we move on and take a look at something else? Hang on. Okay, how about a new project? Now we're going to reinstall the bandsaw blade. So the first thing we do is open up the saw, and then we open up the blade guides so the saw blade will pass through them without a problem. And we need to remove the block down in the bottom cabinet for the dust extraction so the blade can pass through there. So let's take a look. All right, here I think you can see that the roller guides are wide open, ready to receive. I think you can see the lower guides are in the same position. And all we need to do is remove the block. Now we're ready to put the blade on. All right, this is the part where we say, wish me well. Set that in the middle. So. There we go. Move that back down to 1 inch. And that's it. Now we check our tracking. We are right in the center of the blade. Beautiful. All right. So now we put our block back in. And from this point, we'll go ahead and do our blade guides and our thrust bearing, okay? So let's move on. Okay, the first thing we want to do is set the bearing to the gullet of the blade, about 1/64 of an inch back. We're a little too far back right now, so all we do is release the thumb screw in the very back, and we start turning it. And I think we're good right there. So we'll set that. And now we need to set the thrust bearing, and it should be, of course, just behind the blade. Having trouble seeing with the camera here in the way. There we go. So we lock that down. Now let's move the camera so you can see the guide bearings in the front. Okay, remember we want to put these guide bearings just about a paper's thickness next to the blade. So we can, what I do is just touch the blade first and back it off of here, lock it down. Touch the blade, back it off of here, lock it down. Then all we got to do is move. That looks pretty darn nice. So you notice the thrust bearing is just barely rolling it all. That's just fine. All right, now all we have to do is to do the same thing to the bottom guides, and all our bearings are set and we're ready to run. I don't think you need to watch me do that, so we'll say goodbye for a few minutes. Well, all right, we've completed putting on our blade. We got all the guides lined up the way they should be, the thrust bearing, keys back in the slot to keep the table level. One of the first things I wanted to point out here is you can notice that I have the blade guard all the way down. Now this is a safety issue. When a blade guard is up, even if the saw is not running, someone could trip in the shop, fall forward into the blade. Even though the blade wasn't under tension, they could still cut themselves very seriously. So let's move along here. Now to look at the blade, we're going to raise it up. There we go. So as I mentioned, everything is set up. Now one of the issues that we have is the fact that when we turn the saw on and then turn it off, the blade will spool down. Let me give you an example. Now it can take quite a bit of time for this blade to slow down. Consider you're doing something else in the shop and someone else comes in. They don't know the blade is running, there's other noises in the shop, and don't think about it. They could be hurt quite bad. So use the foot brake. Foot brake stops the blade right away. Now the other thing is, if the blade's running and you touch that foot brake, it should cut the motor off. Step on the foot brake. So pretty nice system. It works very, very well. So you have the stop button, you have the foot brake, everything you can to stop that blade from running. And again, when I am done, go ahead and put that all the way down. And that's it. That's another good safety feature. I hope that helped a little bit. Let's move on. Well, hey, before we pass on to the next section, there was one other safety item that I wanted to point out, and I'm not sure if I already talked about this in part one, but I don't want to miss this, and that's the magnetic safety key. Now, the first thing to mention is the light. Again, if I've already said it, I'm sorry, but the light is only on to show you there is power to the saw. That's all that it means. It doesn't mean the saw is running. It means there's power to the saw. Now, the safety key is a simple feature. It's a magnetic button, and all you have to do is turn it, and you can pull it out, and it is magnetized, so you can stick it to the cabinet somewhere, hide it in the shop. But while this is out, the saw will not turn on. Okay, that's a very good safety feature, especially if you're using this saw in a school or you know, trying someplace where you need it to meet the OSHA standard. So don't lose this. I'm sure it would cause quite the problem. But you put it back in, turn it, and you are ready to go. All right, again, we're spooling down. Excuse me. All right, shall we move on? Well, all right, we're getting close to the end here. I'd like to apologize for the length so far. I know it's run a little long, but I've had a lot I wanted to share with you this time. I did want to take a couple minutes out to talk about the company I bought this saw from. Now, I started looking for this saw back in December of 19. I've talked about the reasons already. I had the Laguna Tools Italian model, 20-year-old model. It served me extremely well, but looking for what I wanted, what was being offered by some of the other companies just didn't cut it. And I wanted more of an industrial size saw. I wanted the weight, the size of the cast iron table, all those things we've talked about already. So when it came time to make my purchase, this was during the 15% off sale from Powermatic, offering free shipping as well. So quite a value. Now, I was looking at the 18 and 20-inch bandsaws at the time, and that was a savings between $700 and $900 depending on what model you went with. And I looked on the internet, and I would look at the reviews that some people talked about that company, and the one that came up most often was, I didn't get my saw, it took too long, damage in transit, all those kinds of things. So I decided to do like I normally do, which was look around local. And I remembered I had done business with a company called Eagle Tools. Eagle Tools is in Los Angeles. It's off Treadwell Street if you're not familiar with it. And most important to me, it was run by a gentleman, and is still run by a gentleman that has owned that business for 30 years, and his name is Jesse Barragan. Jesse is an incredible man, has a depth of knowledge about tools in our industry, and he is the man to talk to. So I called Jesse on the phone. We spoke for about a half an hour, talked all things bandsaw. He had great ideas, got me thinking about things that I hadn't considered, and I still landed on the Powermatic. Now, one of the things to do business with Jesse is he will take delivery in Eagle Tools for you. I have the opportunity living here in Orange County that I could drive up to Los Angeles and pick up my saw. I have a full-size pickup truck, so I had no issues. Advantage for me of having Jesse take the delivery was the services that he offers for free to do for you, and I wanted to share those with you. So now this again is if you can go and pick up the saw yourself, and I'm not quite frankly sure if Jesse offers a delivery or not, but the difference is he will check and tune at no charge. So when the saw is delivered, it's delivered on a pallet standing up just like we see it. It's all covered in cosmoline. The fence system needs to be put on, and quite a number of steps need to be gone through. Now, this is good for you if you enjoy doing that kind of thing. It's probably going to take a whole afternoon to do so, but you would get to familiarize yourself with the saw. I kind of figure if you're stepping up to a beast of this size, you've got a lot of experience with a bandsaw already. So what Jesse will do for you at no charge, and this is only a partial list, is he will inspect for freight damage right out. You know, so that's nice. He's going to test the motor and the switch. He's going to check the blade tensioning system and the blade tracking. He's going to run with the blade on and do a vibration check. He's going to set the table for flatness and make sure it's square to the blade. Fence position, he's going to make sure the fence is parallel to the blade, parallel and square to the table. He's going to test the foot brake system to make certain that micro switch and the brake system is working properly. He's going to check the elevation and travel of the arm up here, make sure the blade guides are going to track perfectly up and down the length of the blade. That's always very nice. And he's going to do quite a number of other things for you. Now, when I went into the shop to pick up my saw, it was nice to see it all put together and done. And then, of course, they want to show off and turn it on for you. So I had yet to see this saw without, you know, all put together and running. I'd seen it in the magazines and the ads and all that kind of things, but I had not actually had a chance to touch the saw or look at it. So they fired up this saw, comes with a blade already, and it was just humming quiet, no vibration at all. And looking through the tracking window, the blade was not moving or anything. It was absolutely impressive. So that was my experience to pick up my saw. Last thing I wanted to remark to you again is Eagle Tools, Jesse Barragon, up on Treadwell Street, Los Angeles. Make the phone call, talk to a great guy that can guide you through your selection, and you also have a store to go to that will have it on display for you. Most stores will only have a 14-inch bandsaw there for you. Jesse's got the big dogs of, he's got Powermatic, he's got Laguna Tools, he's got some Agazzani in there, and they're all the big ones. He's got joiners, planers, he's got the equipment in there for you to go take a look. He'll fire it up for you. You're going to hear it run, touch it, feel it, all the good things. Oh, a side note, one of Jesse's favorite stories is the day he got to deliver personally an Agazzani bandsaw to Sam Maloof. Now, Sam Maloof is, of course, in the Los Angeles area. For those of you who have been around in this craft long enough to know, he was an extraordinary craftsman. And Jesse got to spend quite a bit of time with the man over the years. So anyway, last one, Eagle Tools, Los Angeles, Treadwell Street. Give them a call. Okay, let's move on. All right, we're almost done, I promise. But I did want to touch base on how in the world do you get an 840-pound saw home. So normally you get this delivered off a truck, off the lift gate, put at the edge of your garage door type of thing, or your business door. If you have a home shop, most likely your garage door only opens up 82 inches. All right, there's your first problem. The saw is up on a pallet. Your first challenge is, how do I get it off the pallet? Not an easy task, but there are some good solutions out there that work very well for you to do that. So different for me. Mine is going to be brought home in my pickup truck, laying on its back or on its spine. Now that's the same way I got my Laguna saw, right? So that's still a challenge. 840 pounds once it's all assembled and off the pallet. So I mentioned Jesse. One of Jesse's first suggestions was, on the base we have 4 holes that are for bolting the saw to the floor. Okay? He's suggesting get a board about 6 to 8 inches wide and sticking out about 18 inches past each side of the base, bolted on. Now what that's going to do, that's going to stop that saw from tilting left, right in the back of the truck. Now, the saw is 82 inches long. I have the eye hooks on the top, or 82 inches tall is the correct term. So I still had about that much space at the front of the pickup bed. Then I didn't want the saw to slide, so I used some 4x4s and whatnot to put in there to keep it from sliding forward. Also used ratchet straps on the 2 eye bolts on the top to, again, at the nose or the top of the saw, keep it from tipping left, right. And then we used ratchet straps to the base of the bed. The saw was sitting on a sheet of plywood. So now we drive all the way home and it was flawless. No tilt, no bounce, no movement, no nothing. That was awesome. So when I get to the house, I take the tailgate off the pickup, right? Now, all I have to do is get the saw out. Oh my gosh. Now, I've done this before with other pieces of heavy equipment. I take 2 8-foot 2x4s, I put a half a sheet of plywood, screw it to the 2x4s, put a little board across the back of it, and I put a ratchet strap from the underside to the trailer hitch. That's going to keep that ramp from moving at all. So now we still need to get the saw onto the ramp. You can't pull it, believe me. And let me tell you, my driveway is also at an angle. So what we did was I used a tow strap. We wrapped it around the base from underneath the table, and we pulled it out of the pickup to the point where it would start to tip down the ramp. Now, you don't want to chase that thing down the ramp, so it did take a couple men to help me slide it down the ramp. And when we got it to the bottom, I took a come along. I used a snatch block that changed the weight and the tension, and we tilted the saw up to the point where we're just about ready to go over, and underneath it we put a 4x4. Once we had the 4x4 under there, we put the Portamate underneath and finished the adding it to the Portamate, and we were up, done, and at that point we're ready to get the saw set up in my shop. Very, very, it all went quite smooth. So that was another way to do the same thing, I guess. And I mentioned I don't think I did mention, you could of course go rent a U-Haul trailer, any number of other things you could do to get that thing home, but bringing it home on its back was a nice, easy way to do that. So I just thought I'd tell you about my experience of getting a saw home, and let's move on to the next thing, okay? Hang on. Well, okay. This time, this is the end. I want to take a minute to say thanks for enduring this. But I wanted to do a review that wasn't exactly a review. I'm not trying to get anyone to make this purchase to buy this saw. I was just wanting to fill in that gap that was missing while I was looking for it, of information about it. You don't find these on display everywhere because they are expensive. For example, the Rocklers and the Woodcrafts and stores like that don't have the larger saws on display. I think I mentioned during the video that generally they go up to about the 14-inch. So it was difficult for me to find information about them other than the handful of things that were online, as well as the Powermatic commercial. Now, one thing to point out, because of that commercial, the 18, 20, and 24 machines all cut 18 inches below the blade guides. The only differences are the throat size. Horsepower is the same, single phase, that type of thing. So I chose the 18 because of the 18 inches as well as the footprint that it took. I was originally looking at the 20, and wouldn't you know it, the very first cut I go to make, man, I wish I had that 20 inches. So again, to re-emphasize, my purpose is not to say, hey, I bought a great saw and this is the one that you should buy and do your basic unboxing video. I just wanted to show the features of the saw, how well they worked, that type of thing. I wasn't here to really judge and tell you it was better than anybody else's. One of the other things I mentioned were things that I had hoped to continue to work on with the saw. One was a lighting system. Being an older guy, in particular, to see the blade guides, there's just not enough light in the shop to see it. So I use this little sewing machine light. You buy it on Amazon, I think it's about $20. It's got a nice strong magnet to it. See if it sticks to this. And you can put it numerous places. I had this one on my last bandsaw, as well as I have one on my lathe, my grinder, and my drill press, and having the arm that moves around. Now so far with this one, I've used it underneath the saw, and I can bring this little thing up or down so that I can see the bearing guides. And then I did mention as well the idea of bringing the air line down to help keep the table clean and the line clean. These are simply water jet pieces. I did create that for my lathe. It works great while I'm particularly using scrapers. Keeps them clean and you can see where you're going. Has a valve on it. And then I stumbled across the one with the double, which I thought would be pretty nice for blowing the sawdust off the table, as well as aiming it and blowing it off the line. Then the last thing I talked about was whether or not to take those cross members out of the vacuum tubes. You saw the pictures of how when you're cutting green wood in particular, you do get that angel hair kind of sawdust out of it, and it quickly clogs the vent itself. Another thing I would talk about and wonder why Powermatic has gone with this is the throat plate. With the vacuum system directly below the throat plate, I was surprised they used a zero clearance type of throat plate, as opposed to, say, in the Laguna saws, they have the block with all of the holes in it. My son does 3D printing work. I will have him make me a different throat plate to give that as an experiment and see how well that works. So wrapping it all up, I continually talked about enjoying the fit and finish of the machine. I think it's very, very well done. I do enjoy the larger table. I mentioned about the saw not slowing down. I have yet to have put anything through it that slowed that blade down. So I've been very, very pleased with all of those things. I enjoy how smooth the table tilts, how smooth the blade guides can be raised and lowered. I didn't think I would enjoy it, but I'm very impressed with the tensioning and detensioning of the machine. That works really, really nice. So quite a number of positives. So while you're shopping around, I think this is a good unit to look at. So last time, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. Apologize again for the length of it, but I hope it answered a lot of questions you may have had. So thanks again. Have a great year. Thank you. Bye-bye.